Hello, welcome back to this video series all about Christian practices. This is for your GCSE and today we're thinking about church in the local community. This is the 8th video in the series now, and today we're thinking about what's meant by the church, the body of Christ, and we're going to understand how and why churches work for social action in their communities. What's your need to know? You need to know the church is the body of God. They are Jesus's representatives on earth, and they seek to serve those in their community who are struggling. Two of the ways they do this might be by running a food bank or by training street pastors. We've been considering the idea of worship in this series of videos, this idea of showing God his worth by how we act. And one way the church does that is by looking out for people in their community, and they show their love for God by loving others. So what is the church? We've been using this word church a lot. What is it? Well, often the church is used to describe a building. You might say that's a beautiful church, but actually the correct understanding of the term church relates to the people of God, or the body of Christ, as they're also called. When the term church was first used in the New Testament, there were no buildings. It was illegal to be a Christian in lots of parts of the world where the New Testament was written. And so to think of a building as a church, it just wouldn't have happened like that. It was the collective people who were known as the church. As I'm recording this message, there are lots of things going on around the world that are awful. Disasters happen, wars break out. And at those times, lots of people can ask the question, where is God? Where is God in the midst of this mess and in the midst of this suffering? Well, a Christian answer to that might be that God is living in the hearts of the Christians that are on earth. And so being a Christian is a great honor, and it's also a great responsibility. It's an honor to be the representative of Christ on earth as part of his body. But at the same time, it's also a responsibility to be Christ-like to people around us, especially when they're going through hard times. This idea of being Jesus' representatives, you have to go back and think about what was Jesus like. Well, Jesus went around speaking to people the truth about who God was and what God was like, but also about meeting their physical needs, be that through healing or feeding or welcoming outcasts into his love, into society, welcoming people back. For example, Matthew the tax collector, the woman with a hemorrhage, the man with leprosy. These were people who were seen as outsiders, and Jesus went out of his way to bring those people in and to make them feel loved. Now, St. Teresa of Avila, she wrote these words. You can read them on the screen there. Christ has no body on earth but yours. This is written to the church. Yours are the eyes with which he looks compassionately on this world. Yours are the feet with which he walks to do good. Yours are the hands with which he blesses all the world. Christ has no body now on earth but yours. And the point she's making here is that Jesus' physical body has ascended to heaven, but his spirit has come down and now lives in the hearts of Christians. And now Christians are his representatives. So for Jesus to do work on earth today, he does that through the people of God. He does that through the church, the body of Christ. So what does that look like? Well, one expression we're going to look at in this lesson and the next lesson is social action, which effectively means showing practical love to people. And we see examples of this in the Bible. Christians are instructed in 1 John here, if anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? I.e., if you see someone in need and you've got the means to help them, then you should, and that's how you show God's love. You'll also be familiar with the parable of the sheep and the goats, and in that Jesus divides everyone into two groups, and he says to the group on his right, who are the sheep, who are going to go to the kingdom of heaven and inherit wonderful things, he said, whatever you did for the least of these brothers or sisters of mine, you did for me, i.e., you fed the hungry, you gave water to the thirsty, you welcomed in those who had nowhere to go, etc. So Jesus and John here, telling about our actions, demonstrating our love for God. Let's pause here. Here's some questions to have a go at. When you're ready, push play and we'll talk through the answers. So question 1 is, what is the church? And hopefully you wrote something like, it's the body of Christ, it's the people of God. It's all of the Christians worldwide, among whom Jesus is living and active. Being part of the church is a great honor because you're representing Jesus. If you imagine if you got to go to a great event and you were representing your favorite celebrity like Dwayne Johnson, if he sent you as his representative, you'd feel honored, I'm sure, to represent someone so great. But it's also a great responsibility because you are demonstrating what Christ is like to people who don't know him. And so the way that you're going to leave them feeling is going to directly influence their opinion of Jesus. Why do Christians want to help those in the community? Because Jesus did, and because the Bible is full of instructions that we should love our neighbor, feed the hungry, give something to drink to those who are thirsty, welcome those in who are outsiders, etc. And the extension there was to think about the biggest needs in your community, and I wonder what you think the church would do about them. So let's think about needs. All around us there's a huge amount of need, and it's one of the church's mission is to go out there and lovingly meet those needs. Now, as I'm recording this, we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis is one issue we've got. And also we know that crime rate in some areas is higher. So two ways the church goes to meet these needs in terms of feeding the hungry is through food banks. And the way that it keeps some people safe is through the work of street pastors. And we're going to look at those now. So let's start with food banks. Food banks are on the rise. If you see a chart here from the Trussell Trust, which is a big food bank agency, you can see that with every year that's gone by since 2017 to 2018, the need for food banks has risen, i.e. people are struggling with the cost of living, and even though they have jobs, they're unable to put food on the table and pay for some of the groceries that they need. And so churches, and not just churches, some supermarkets do this, and you get council-run food banks as well, but they run what are called food banks. And the way that a food bank works is that the church, that's the people of God in a local area, come together and bring donations of food, groceries, nappies, toiletries, etc. And they bring them to the church. And then the church works with others to make sure that these are distributed to people who are in need. It's not that you turn up at a church and you can go and choose a load of food. And although some churches may run services like that, generally a food bank works through referrals. So the police, schools, GPs, etc. The social services, they work with people who are in need, and they refer those people to a food bank. And then the people at the church or whoever's running the food bank bring those things to those who are in need. We can just pause here, check your understanding so far, pause here, have a go at these, and then push play when you're ready to hear the answers. So what is a food bank? A food bank is where Christians donate food and groceries, and then the church distributes those to people who are in need. It's influenced by many Christian teachings, including love your neighbor and the parable of the sheep and the goats. Providing a food bank for the community should be more important to the local church than celebrating communion. How might you answer this question? Well, you might talk about the church loving their neighbor, meeting their needs practically, feeding the hungry, just like Jesus did when he fed the 5,000. You might talk about how that demonstrates love to people who don't know Jesus, and so they might be more likely to come and hear more about him. On the other hand, it never says in the Bible to run a food bank explicitly. And so other Christians would say, well, Jesus said with the bread and the wine at communion, do this in remembrance of me. It was an instruction, a clear instruction that the church is to carry out. Also, when celebrating communion, if we think about the names for it, like the Eucharist, you're saying thank you to God. Thank you for his sacrifice. That's just a few ideas. You may have come up with even better ones yourself. And the extension was to think about you personally. How much money would you be prepared to give those in need? The second need we thought about is crime and safety. So if you would like to imagine for a moment, it's 2 a.m. in a town centre in England. It's a Friday night and the bars have just closed. Maybe pause the video here and write down as many dangers that you can think of. I don't know if you had a go at that or not, but some ideas you might have thought about would be, drunk people around, violence, especially if people have been drinking, drugs, maybe gangs, maybe someone getting intoxicated and finding it hard to get home, struggling to get home. There's lots of dangers out there, especially at a time like that in a city centre. Now, one answer to this that the church came up with It's called the Street Pastors. This was started by a chap called Les Isaacs in Brixton, who saw the need, and then he set up this service called the Street Pastors, where Christians volunteered to train up to become these people who would go out at night, normally one weeknight and one weekend night, from like 9 o'clock at night till 4 in the morning, to be a wholesome and good present representing God on the streets to help those people who were vulnerable. Now, they have different tools at their disposal. For example, they take out flip-flops and lollipops and bottles of water. And it might be that they meet a girl who's been out in her high heels and is struggling to walk or struggling to get home, and they give out these flip-flops free of charge. They also offer lollipops to people. Maybe if they're feeling angry, you can interrupt a fight and give someone a lollipop, and it can pacify someone. Also give them a bit of a sugar hit when they need one, if they're hungry. And then a bottle of water could be helpful if someone has had too much to drink, and it's going to help them sober up. I've been blessed to meet some street pastors in my times, and I've heard some unbelievable, amazing stories about things that they have done. Everything from, I remember meeting some person who'd broken up a big fight, and not by going in and being physical, but just by entering and their presence there calmed the situation down. Another one who'd rescued a girl who was being led off with some strangers, who was intoxicated, and again, that presence there of being a good influence on others and a good presence, just calming things down. It's been shown statistically that every city in the UK that the street pastors have gone to, the crime rate has gone down. And police often are keen for cities that don't have them yet to set up a street pastor's service, so that, because they know that the effect it's going to have on their streets. So pause here, have a go at these final questions, and then we'll look at the answers. So what are street pastors? Street pastors are Christians who train up and they volunteer to go out at night time in city centres to be a source for good, and they share the love of God through their actions. They help people by giving them, it could be different directions, they could be just talking to them, giving them company. It's the fact that their presence there makes people safe. They work with drunk people, they sort out problems, they stop fights. There's lots of great things. Oh, they pick up bottles. When they see bottles on the street, they pick those up as well. Number 9 is hopefully a great question to think about your evaluation. What should the church provide if it could only do one? Should it do food banks or street pastors? Well, in argument of food banks, you're meeting the needs of the most vulnerable in your society. Jesus was someone who fed the hungry, and he made a point in the parable of the sheep and the goats of saying explicitly, when I was hungry, you fed me. And clearly this is a need that he talks about. However, with the street pastors, we've seen statistically, the good that it can do in bringing down crime rates. And I think this is a question where you want to use the word "it depends," and it probably depends on the locality, the community that the church finds itself in, and meeting the needs of that community. Extension there was to think about street pastors. Maybe they should make evangelism a bigger priority. They don't go out primarily to preach. It might be that they have good conversations about Jesus while they're helping people, but it's not their top priority. Their top priority is to help. We've got a session coming up all about evangelism, and it'd be good to watch that one to help underpin some of the thoughts that you could go into when explaining why evangelism should be a high priority. So that brings us to the end of this session. Just to revisit our need to know. You need to know the church is the body of God. They are Jesus's representatives on earth today, and they seek to help those who are in need in their communities. Many churches do this by running food banks and by training up street pastors. See you next time.